What if I told you that the woman whose name is on the cover of one of literature's greatest novels was supposed to die on the very last page? Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa Dalloway, Virginia Woolf's most famous heroine. She was meant to end her own story with her own death, but she didn't. Instead, a shell-shocked war veteran named Septimus Warren Smith threw himself out of a window, and Clarissa lived. In June 1923, Virginia Woolf sat in her study in Richmond, just outside London, and made one of the most consequential decisions in modern literature. She was writing a novel about a single day, one ordinary Wednesday in June 1923, following a 52-year-old society woman as she prepares for a party. The novel was revolutionary. Woolf was pioneering a technique called stream of consciousness, diving deep into the inner thoughts, memories, and sensations of her characters as they moved through London's streets. No traditional plot, no dramatic action, just the human mind, in all its fragile, beautiful complexity, set against the backdrop of a city still haunted by the Great War. But here's what almost no one knows. Clarissa Dalloway was never supposed to survive that June day. In Woolf's original plan, documented in her own diaries, the novel was supposed to end with Clarissa's death. The party, the flowers, the memories, the rekindling of old flames, all of it building toward one final, devastating conclusion. And then, Woolf changed her mind. Or rather, she found someone else to die in Clarissa's place. Today, we're going to explore one of the most brilliant acts of literary substitution ever committed to paper. We're going to uncover why Virginia Woolf created Septimus Warren Smith, a character who never even meets Clarissa, and how his death became the shadow that allowed her to live. This is the hidden architecture of Mrs. Dalloway. This is the story behind the story. Let's begin. To understand why Septimus exists, we need to go back to where it all started, in Virginia Woolf's private diaries and letters from 1922 to 1923. In October 1922, Woolf was working on a short story called Mrs. Dalloway in Bond Street. It was a simple sketch, a middle-aged woman shopping for gloves in London's fashionable district. But as she wrote, something deeper began to emerge. She saw in this woman, this Clarissa, something profoundly tragic, a life of surfaces, a woman who had chosen safety over passion, convention over authenticity. By June 1923, that short story had grown into something much larger. Woolf wrote in her diary about her new novel, describing it as a study of insanity and suicide. And here's the crucial part. She explicitly stated that her intention was for the story to culminate in death. Mrs. Dalloway would not simply attend her party, she would die there, or shortly after, revealing the emptiness at the heart of her carefully constructed existence. But why? Why did Woolf believe Clarissa needed to die? The answer lies in what Clarissa represented to Woolf. Clarissa Dalloway was the perfect symbol of post-war English society. Elegant, refined, obsessed with propriety and appearances. She had married Richard Dalloway, a respectable member of Parliament, instead of Peter Walsh, the man who truly challenged and excited her. She had chosen the drawing room over the wilderness of genuine feeling. To Woolf, this kind of life, this sacrifice of the authentic self for social acceptance, was a kind of death already, a living death. So why not make it literal? Why not have Clarissa's physical death mirror the spiritual death she'd been living all along? There's another layer here too, one that's deeply personal. Virginia Woolf herself struggled with severe depression and suicidal thoughts throughout her life. She had attempted suicide multiple times before writing Mrs. Dalloway. In 1913, she had taken an overdose of veronal. In 1941, she would walk into the River Ouse with stones in her pockets. Writing about suicide wasn't abstract for Woolf. It was intimate. It was real. And perhaps, in those early drafts, she was writing about her own temptation, the seductive pull of ending it all when the weight of existence becomes unbearable. So there it was, the perfect ending. Clarissa Dalloway, dressed in her silver-green gown, standing in her Westminster drawing room, surrounded by politicians and socialites, would somehow quietly, devastatingly, cease to exist. The party would go on. The world would go on. But she would be gone, and with her, the last illusions about the possibility of happiness in a hollow world. It made perfect artistic sense. It was thematically coherent. It was brave. But Woolf couldn't do it. And that's where our story really begins. Somewhere in the middle of writing Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf made a discovery. She couldn't kill Clarissa, not directly. It was too painful, too close to home. But the novel still needed death. It needed that confrontation with mortality, that moment where life and death stand face to face. So Woolf did something extraordinary. She split Clarissa in two. She created a shadow self, a double, someone who could carry the death she couldn't bear to give her heroine. His name was Septimus Warren Smith, a 29-year-old war veteran, a poet who once loved Shakespeare and went to war full of romantic ideals. A man who watched his closest friend, Evans, blown to pieces in the trenches of Italy. A man who came home unable to feel anything at all. Woolf wrote in her diary that she wanted to show two different types of consciousness, one that survives and one that doesn't. Clarissa would be the survivor. Septimus would be the casualty. But here's what makes this so brilliant. Septimus and Clarissa are not just two separate characters. They are mirrors of each other, reflections, two versions of the same soul experiencing the same June day in radically different ways. They both walk through London on the same Wednesday morning. They both hear the same sounds, Big Ben chiming the hours, an airplane writing letters in the sky. They both possess an extraordinary sensitivity to life, a heightened awareness that makes ordinary existence almost unbearably intense. Clarissa, standing in her Westminster home, experiences moments of pure transcendence. She feels connected to everything, to the trees, to the sky, to strangers passing in the street. She thinks about life and death constantly. She has, as she admits, a profound sense of her own mortality. Septimus, sitting in Regent's Park with his Italian wife Rezia, experiences the exact same transcendence, but for him, it's terrifying. He sees the dead, he hears voices, he believes that trees are alive and speaking to him, that the airplane is sending him coded messages. What Clarissa experiences as beauty, Septimus experiences as madness. They are the same person, split by circumstance. She had privilege, protection, the safety of her class. He had none of that. He went to war. He saw the absolute worst of human nature, and he came back broken. And here's the most haunting part. They never meet. Not once. They pass within blocks of each other on the streets of London, but they remain strangers. And yet, they are more connected than any two characters who share scenes together. The climax of Septimus's story comes in the late afternoon. Two doctors have been trying to control him, Dr. Holmes and the more sinister Sir William Bradshaw, who wants to send Septimus to an asylum in the countryside, to separate him from his wife, to force him into what they call proportion and conversion. Septimus knows what this means. It means the death of his self, the extinction of everything that makes him who he is. So when Dr. Holmes comes up the stairs to take him away, Septimus makes his choice. He throws himself from the window. In Woolf's words, he plunges onto the railings below. His last thought is defiant. He doesn't want to die, but he won't let them take away his soul. That evening, the news reaches Clarissa's party. Lady Bradshaw mentions it casually to Richard. A young man, a veteran, had killed himself that afternoon. Her husband had been treating him. Clarissa overhears. She leaves her guests and retreats to a small room to process what she's just learned. And in that moment, something extraordinary happens. She doesn't feel horror or pity. She feels recognition. She feels kinship. She thinks, he made her feel the beauty, the terror of life. He had thrown it all away, but in doing so, he had preserved something. His death was an act of defiance, of communication. He was saying what she had always felt but never dared to say. That life is unbearable and glorious at the same time. That sometimes the only way to preserve your soul is to let go of everything else. In that quiet room, alone with the news of a stranger's death, Clarissa Dalloway confronts her own mortality, and she survives it. She must return to her party. She must go on living. But now, she carries his death inside her. Septimus died so Clarissa could live. The death that was meant for her found him instead. And in the most profound sense, they became one person, the one who dies and the one who continues. So why was this substitution, this splitting of one character into two, such a stroke of genius? Why is Mrs. Dalloway considered one of the masterpieces of modernist literature? The answer is structural. By creating two protagonists instead of one, Woolf gave herself the ability to explore two entirely different worlds within the same novel, on the same day, in the same city. Through Clarissa, we see the world of privilege, Westminster drawing rooms, members of parliament, elegant parties, the carefully maintained facade of upper-class British society. She moves through spaces of power, of influence, of social grace. Her concerns are flowers, guest lists, the perfect dress. Her anxieties are subtle, understated, hidden beneath layers of propriety. Through Septimus, we see the other London, the London of trauma, of poverty, of those broken by the war that the upper classes prefer to forget. He lives in modest rooms with his working-class Italian wife. He has no connections, no safety net. When the medical establishment decides he's a problem, there's no one powerful enough to protect him. These two worlds never intersect directly, yet they exist simultaneously, separated only by a few miles and an immense gulf of class privilege. Woolf shows us that post-war Britain contains both realities, the party and the suicide, the celebration and the tragedy happening at the exact same moment. But the brilliance goes deeper than social commentary. The relationship between Clarissa and Septimus operates on a psychological level that's almost mystical. Septimus represents everything Clarissa has repressed. He is the part of her that feels too much, that can't adapt, that refuses to accept the compromises required by civilized society. When Clarissa chose Richard over Peter, when she chose safety over passion, she buried a part of herself. That buried part is Septimus. He embodies what psychiatrists would now call post-traumatic stress disorder, but in 1923, it was called shell shock, a condition dismissed, misunderstood, and brutally treated. Septimus hears the voice of his dead friend Evans. He can't feel love for his wife. He experiences the world as simultaneously transcendent and unbearable. He is, in psychological terms, dissociated, split from his own emotions as a survival mechanism. And doesn't that sound like Clarissa too? She also feels split, divided, unable to fully connect with her own emotions. She loves her husband, but doesn't feel passion for him. She throws parties to create connection, but feels profoundly alone. She has survived by numbing herself, by becoming acceptable, by performing the role expected of her. Septimus is Clarissa without the armor of class privilege. He's what happens when sensitivity meets trauma, without the protective buffer of wealth and social position. His madness is her sanity, pushed to its breaking point. And this is where Woolf's substitution becomes thematically profound. By giving death to Septimus, she allowed Clarissa to do something extraordinary, to confront death without dying, to understand mortality without surrendering to it. When Clarissa hears about Septimus's suicide, she experiences a moment of complete clarity. She understands him. She doesn't judge him. She recognizes that his death was, in its own way, an embrace of life, a refusal to be diminished, to be controlled, to be made less than what he was. Woolf writes that Clarissa feels the young man has made her feel the beauty of life. Through his death, she reconnects with what it means to be truly alive. She has been going through the motions, performing her social role, but now confronted with someone who chose death over compromise, she rediscovers her own will to live. The ending of the novel becomes not about death, but about choosing life despite everything. Clarissa returns to her party. She re-enters the room where her guests are waiting, and in doing so, she makes a conscious choice to continue, to engage, to celebrate existence even with full knowledge of its fragility and pain. If Woolf had killed Clarissa, the novel would have been a tragedy, a story about despair, about the impossibility of authentic life in modern society. But by creating Septimus to die in her place, Woolf transformed it into something more complex. A meditation on survival, on the relationship between life and death, on how we carry the dead within us and are changed by them. Septimus's death is not meaningless. It's the sacrifice that makes Clarissa's survival meaningful. He dies so that she, and by extension, we can understand what it means to truly choose life. Now, if you go back and read Mrs. Dalloway with this knowledge that Septimus is Clarissa's shadow self, her death substitute, you'll start to notice something extraordinary. The novel is filled with hidden connections, invisible threads that bind these two characters together, even though they never meet. Take, for instance, the airplane writing in the sky. It appears early in the novel, and both Clarissa and Septimus see it, but they see it completely differently. For Clarissa and the people in her world, it's an advertisement, a modern spectacle, something curious and entertaining. For Septimus, it's a divine message. He believes it's writing about him, communicating truths that only he can understand. The same phenomenon, two completely different interpretations, one grounded in social reality, one lost in psychological chaos. Yet both responses come from the same heightened sensitivity to the world around them. Then there's Big Ben. Throughout the novel, the great clock chimes the hours, marking time's relentless passage. Every character hears it, but for Clarissa and Septimus, it carries a special weight. Each chime is a memento mori, a reminder of mortality, of time running out, of the approaching end. Clarissa hears Big Ben and thinks about how she's getting older, how her life is narrowing, how death is approaching. Septimus hears Big Ben and feels time itself becoming unstable, threatening, a force that's crushing him. Same sound, same existential weight, different experiences of temporal dread. But the most profound connection is literary. Both Clarissa and Septimus love Shakespeare, and both are drawn to the same play, the same lines. From Cymbeline, the dirge that begins with the words, "Fear no more the heat of the sun." This is a song about death as rest, as release from suffering. Clarissa recites it quietly to herself. Septimus hears it in his head as he contemplates his own end. It's the thread that connects them most intimately. This shared understanding that death might be a mercy, a freedom, an escape from the unbearable intensity of being alive. But perhaps the most damning connection between Clarissa and Septimus is their shared enemy, the medical establishment, personified by Sir William Bradshaw. Sir William is one of London's most respected psychiatrists. He treats the wealthy and powerful. He speaks in calm, measured tones about proportion and conversion. His terms for forcing people to conform, to behave properly, to fit into society's expectations. He believes madness is simply a failure of self-control, something to be corrected through isolation and discipline. When Septimus is brought to him, Sir William immediately decides that Septimus must be separated from his wife and sent to the countryside not to help him heal, but to remove him from society, to silence him, to make him invisible. Sir William represents the crushing force of social conformity, the violence hidden beneath polite medical language. And here's what's remarkable. Clarissa has never met Septimus, but she knows Sir William Bradshaw. He attends her party that evening, and the moment Lady Bradshaw mentions his name, Clarissa feels an instinctive revulsion. She thinks about how she hates doctors, how they represent everything oppressive and controlling about society. Without knowing it, Clarissa is responding to the man who drove Septimus to his death. She senses in Bradshaw the same force that has constrained her own life, the demand to be proper, to suppress feeling, to sacrifice authenticity for social acceptance. Woolf makes it clear the same system that kills Septimus has been slowly suffocating Clarissa her entire life. He couldn't survive it. She has, but only by becoming half alive, by numbing herself, by playing the role expected of her. And this brings us to the party itself, Clarissa's party, the event that structures the entire novel. On the surface, the party seems trivial. It's just a social gathering, people in evening dress, making small talk, politicians and socialites mingling. Critics at the time dismissed Clarissa as shallow for caring so much about something so superficial. But Woolf shows us that the party is Clarissa's art form. It's her way of creating connection, of bringing people together, of making something beautiful out of the fragments of social life. In a world that feels broken and disconnected after the war, the party is an act of creation, an assertion that life can still have meaning, coherence, joy. When Clarissa learns of Septimus's death in the middle of her party, she's faced with a choice. She could let his death destroy the evening. She could retreat into grief and horror. But instead, after her moment of private contemplation, she makes a deliberate choice. She returns to the party. This return is not a rejection of Septimus or his suffering. It's an acknowledgement of it. She understands now, more deeply than ever, what it costs to stay alive, to continue participating in life despite knowing its fragility. Septimus chose death to preserve his integrity. Clarissa chooses life, carrying his death within her. The party becomes a ritual of integration, the living and the dead, joy and sorrow, celebration and mourning, all existing simultaneously. It's no longer a superficial social event. It's become something sacred, a space where life and death meet and acknowledge each other. This is why Septimus had to die and Clarissa had to live. His death gives her life meaning. Her life gives his death meaning. They complete each other across the vast distance that separates them, one the sacrifice, one the survivor, together forming a single portrait of what it means to be human in a world that's beautiful and terrible at once. Now we need to talk about the person behind all of this, Virginia Woolf herself, because the decision to create Septimus, to split the death between two characters, wasn't just an artistic choice. It was deeply, painfully personal. Virginia Woolf knew madness intimately. She had her first major breakdown at age 13 after her mother's death. She attempted suicide for the first time at 22 by jumping from a window, the exact method Septimus would later use in her novel. Throughout her life, she experienced what we would now recognize as bipolar disorder, periods of intense creative energy, followed by devastating depression. When she was writing Mrs Dalloway in the early 1922s, she was still recovering from a severe breakdown that had lasted nearly 2 years. She knew what it felt like to hear voices, to see visions, to feel that the boundary between self and world was dissolving. She knew the terror of losing control of your own mind. And here's what's crucial. Woolf was treated by doctors very much like Sir William Bradshaw. They prescribed rest cures that meant isolation and forced feeding. They told her to stop writing, to stop thinking so much, to be calm and conventional and properly feminine. They saw her genius as a symptom, her creativity as a disease to be cured. So when Woolf writes about Septimus being hunted by doctors, about Sir William's cold determination to convert him into something acceptable, she's writing from experience. She's writing about what was done to her, what was still being done to people like her. Septimus becomes, in this sense, a kind of exorcism. He embodies all of Woolf's darkest thoughts, her suicidal impulses, her terror of madness. By putting those feelings into him, by allowing him to act on them, Woolf creates a safe distance. She can explore her own demons without succumbing to them. This is where we arrive at the heart of why Woolf changed her plan. She couldn't kill Clarissa, because Clarissa was too much like her public self. The accomplished writer, the hostess, the woman who managed to function in society despite her inner turmoil. To kill Clarissa would have been to kill herself symbolically, to admit that survival was impossible, that the battle with depression and mental illness could only end one way. And Woolf wasn't ready to do that. She was still fighting. She was still choosing to live. But she needed to acknowledge the death wish. She needed to honor that part of herself that sometimes wanted to give up, to escape, to find peace in oblivion. So she created Septimus to carry that burden for her. It's a kind of psychological bargain. Septimus dies so that Woolf and Clarissa can continue. He becomes the sacrifice that makes survival possible. And in doing so, he allows Woolf to complete the novel, to reach the end, without having to confront the unbearable question of whether her heroine should live or die. There's something profoundly moving about this. Writing Mrs. Dalloway was itself an act of survival for Woolf. Every page was a negotiation between the will to live and the desire to give up. Creating Septimus allowed her to acknowledge both impulses honestly, to say, yes, death is real, death is tempting, Death might even be merciful, but life is still worth choosing. And for 17 more years, Woolf did choose life. She wrote more novels. She continued her literary experiments. She pushed modernist fiction further than perhaps anyone else. But in 1941, sensing another breakdown coming, one she feared she wouldn't survive, she walked into the River Ouse with stones in her pockets. In her final note to her husband, Leonard, she wrote that she couldn't go through another breakdown, that she couldn't burden him anymore. It's heartbreaking, but it also makes Mrs. Dalloway even more powerful in retrospect. Because we know now that Woolf was writing about herself all along, about the constant negotiation between life and death, about finding reasons to continue when everything feels impossible. Septimus Warren Smith wasn't just a character. He was a lifeline. He was the shadow that allowed the light to exist. He was proof that Woolf understood her own darkness intimately enough to transform it into art, and in doing so, to survive it at least for a while longer. The genius of Mrs. Dalloway isn't just literary, it's existential. It's a novel that asks, how do we keep living when we understand, deeply and truly, how fragile and painful existence is? And the answer Woolf gives through her double protagonists is this: we acknowledge the death inside us, we honor it, we let part of us die so that another part can continue. We carry the dead with us, and somehow, impossibly, that makes life more bearable, more meaningful, more worth living. So let's come back to where we started. Virginia Woolf sat down to write a novel about a woman who would die at the end, but she couldn't do it. The death was too close, too painful, too final. So she made a choice that transformed not just her novel, but the entire landscape of modern literature. She split one character into two. She created a shadow self, a double, someone who could carry the death her heroine couldn't bear. Septimus Warren Smith was never meant to be just another character in the story. He was the answer to an impossible problem. He was the sacrifice that made survival possible for Clarissa, for the novel, and ultimately, for Woolf herself. What makes this substitution so brilliant is that it enriched the novel immeasurably. Instead of one story, we get two. Instead of one consciousness, we get multiple perspectives. We see both the privileged world of Westminster drawing rooms and the broken world of post-war trauma. We see how the same sensitivity can lead to social grace in one person and madness in another, depending entirely on circumstances beyond their control. And we get something even more profound, a meditation on life and death that doesn't choose between them, but holds them both in tension. Clarissa lives, but she carries Septimus's death inside her. She returns to her party transformed, no longer running from mortality, but accepting it as part of what makes life precious. Two characters became infinitely more powerful than one could ever be. Clarissa alone would have been tragic. Septimus alone would have been unbearable. But together, never meeting, always connected, they create a complete portrait of what it means to be human. There's a line I keep coming back to, something Woolf wrote in her diary while working on this novel. She said that writing was a way of making sense of chaos, of finding order in the overwhelming rush of sensation and memory that makes up consciousness. And isn't that exactly what she did with Septimus and Clarissa? She took the chaos of her own inner life, the constant negotiation between wanting to live and wanting to die, between functioning in society and feeling utterly alienated from it, and she gave it form. She gave it structure. She made it into art. Sometimes, the greatest artistic decisions come from what we cannot bear to write directly. Sometimes we need shadows, doubles, substitutes to help us tell the truths we can't face head-on. Woolf couldn't kill Clarissa, so she created Septimus to die in her place. And in doing so, she created one of the most profound explorations of human consciousness ever written. Clarissa lives because Septimus dies. Septimus dies because Clarissa must live. And both are eternal because of it, two halves of the same soul, forever bound together in the pages of a novel that refuses to look away from either the beauty or the terror of being alive. If you've never read Mrs. Dalloway, I hope this has given you a new lens through which to approach it. And if you have read it, I hope you'll go back and see these hidden connections for yourself, the way Woolf wove two lives together so seamlessly that we almost miss how radical and brilliant the structure really is. There are so many other hidden depths in classic literature waiting to be discovered, moments where an author's personal struggle becomes the key to understanding their greatest work. If you found this exploration valuable, I'd love to hear what other classics you'd like me to dive into. Leave your suggestions in the comments below. And if this changed how you think about Mrs. Dalloway, if it revealed something you hadn't seen before, consider sharing this video with someone who loves literature as much as you do. Sometimes the best conversations start when we discover that a book we thought we knew still has secrets to reveal. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the hidden architecture of one of literature's masterpieces. Until next time, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep discovering the depths beneath the surface.